Tom Bauer claims a leaked Archie file exists, and if even half of what's being whispered is true, then Meghan and Harry aren't just facing criticism anymore. They're staring down questions that cut straight through everything they've said, everything they've built, and everything they've tried to control. Because this isn't just about a rumor, it's about timing, it's about patterns, and most of all, it's about what happens when a story that was carefully managed suddenly starts slipping out of someone else's hand.
How she's very proud of Lilibet, her daughter, who's finding her voice. I mean, she is so self-obsessed.
Young kids to be prince and princess, it's beyond a joke. It's beyond a joke now.
Well, it's king and queen of hypocrisy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, bringing the children, the whole thing. I think the king will be very, very wary of meeting Harry. Yeah. Then they say the royals were invited to the baptism ceremony. It was interesting that no one else knew about that. That they deceived the public about the birth date and time of the whole event. So, and also...
Now stop right there, because that clip isn't just background, it's the foundation. King Charles III hasn't seen Archie in years. And while the world has been fed fragments, headlines, carefully framed moments, something else has been quietly building underneath it all. A timeline that doesn't quite line up. A sequence of decisions that, when placed side by side, start to look less like coincidence and more like calculation. Tom Bauer doesn't deal in emotion. He deals in sequence, in cause and effect, and who benefits when something happens, and who benefits even more when something doesn't. And now suddenly there's talk of a file. Not confirmed, not officially acknowledged, but discussed enough in the right circles to make people stop and look twice. A file connected to Archie. A file that supposedly maps decisions, appearances, absences, announcements, every moment where his name was used, withheld, emphasized, or quietly removed. And here's where it starts to feel uncomfortable. Because once you go back, really go back, the pattern is there.
Interested in facts will look elsewhere. Those seeking deranged conspiracy and melodrama know exactly.
Every major Archie moment didn't just happen, it landed hard. Precisely, the Oprah interview wasn't just emotional, it was timed. The allegation about Archie's future, about his skin color, about his title, it didn't just create headlines, it dominated them. It reshaped perception overnight. And yet, what followed? Silence, no clarification, no expansion, just the impact left hanging in the air. And that's exactly the kind of moment Tom Bauer circles. Not what was said, but what was left unsaid.
Stories about being blindsiding the Queen were very, very damaging to them.
Because Archie was never in that room. He never chose any of it. And yet somehow, he became central to one of the most explosive narratives the monarchy has faced in decades. A narrative that exploded loudly and then resolved quietly. That's the part people forget. The title issue, the protocol, the fact that everything that was framed as exclusion eventually corrected itself automatically when the rules shifted. No apology, no correction, just a silent adjustment that didn't get even a fraction of the attention the original claim received. And if this so-called file exists, that's exactly the kind of entry it would highlight. Loud accusation, quiet resolution, over and over again.
Perhaps the most sensational revelation in the book was the fact that the Queen...
Because even before the interview, before the fallout, before the global reaction, decisions were already being made. Titles offered, declined, names chosen, loaded with meaning. Moves that seemed emotional on the surface, but when you step back, when you line them up, they begin to form something else entirely. Something strategic. And then came the name.
Baby Archie hasn't been given a royal title. It had been expected that he would inherit the Earl of Dumbarton, which is one of Prince...
A name that wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. Deeply private, suddenly public. A connection to the very institution Meghan and Harry were publicly stepping away from, yet still tied to in the most intimate way possible. And that's where the contradiction begins to tighten. Because if the story was about distance, why keep reaching back? If the narrative was about separation, why maintain the strongest emotional link imaginable? Tom Bauer doesn't answer that directly. He doesn't need to. He just points to the sequence, the timing, the way each move lands exactly when it has the most impact. And now people are asking, if this file is real, what else is in it? What patterns haven't been noticed yet? Because the next layer isn't about interviews or names, it's about control. The images that never appeared, the moments that never got captured, the meetings that happened behind closed doors and left no visual trace, moments that could have defined everything, but didn't, because someone made sure they didn't. And if that sounds dramatic, it's supposed to. Because this story has never been simple. It's never been linear. It's a constant push and pull between what's shown and what's held back. And now, with whispers of documentation of a timeline that lays it all out step by step, the question isn't whether people will look. The question is what they'll see when they do, and whether Meghan and Harry can still control the narrative once someone else starts connecting the dots. And the moment you start connecting those dots, the story stops feeling like a series of separate incidents and starts looking like something structured, something layered, something that may have been unfolding in plain sight the entire time without anyone fully stepping back to map it all together. Because the alleged file Tom Bower is said to be referencing doesn't just revisit old moments, it reframes them. It forces every decision involving Archie, every appearance of Lilibet, every silence from Meghan and Harry to sit next to each other in a way that raises a much sharper question. Was this ever random, or was it always controlled? And then you get to the moments that never fully made sense until now. The Jubilee meeting. The one moment the world expected to see. The photograph that would have changed everything. And yet it never appeared. Not a leak, not a blurry frame, not even a controlled release. Nothing. That absence becomes louder when placed inside a timeline. Because when Harry and Meghan brought Archie and Lilibet into that space, they didn't just bring family, they brought expectation. They brought narrative weight. And when the image didn't happen, when the moment stayed locked inside a private room, the story didn't end, it shifted. That shift matters because it's exactly the kind of pivot Tom Bower tracks. A moment loaded with emotional potential that quietly dissolves before it can be used publicly. A buildup that leads not to a reveal, but to absence. And once again, the same structure appears. Amplify, withhold, move on. But the file, if it exists, doesn't stop there. Because then comes the part that made even insiders pause. The commercial moment, the candles, a detail that seemed small at first, almost trivial until you look at how it unfolded. Titles attached to Archie and Lilibet, fully framed, fully visible. Then criticism hits and suddenly those same titles vanish from the final product like they were never meant to stay. No statement, no explanation, just gone. That's not a mistake, that's a sequence. And sequences are exactly what Tom Bower builds cases around. What gets released first, what gets corrected later, what people see, and what quietly disappears once it's already done its job. And now, placed inside this broader narrative, it raises something far more uncomfortable than a simple branding misstep. Because if Archie and Lilibet are being protected, if privacy has always been the priority, then why do their names keep appearing exactly when the stakes are highest? Why do they enter the story at peak emotional moments and then exit just as quietly once the reaction has landed? That contradiction doesn't resolve itself. It builds, and then comes the future. The part nobody can control. Because Archie isn't going to stay a child forever. Lilibet isn't going to remain a name people debate from a distance. At some point, both step into awareness, into understanding, into a position where they can look back at every headline, every decision, every moment their names were used without their voice attached to it. And that's where the entire structure starts to feel unstable. Because what happens when Archie reads everything? What happens when Lilibet connects the timeline, the interview, the titles, the absence, the commercial use, the quiet corrections, the planned futures that were discussed before either had any say at all? That's not just history. That's a blueprint. And if Tom Bower's claim about a file is even partially accurate, then that blueprint isn't just theoretical anymore, it's documented. Which brings everything back to the same question that keeps resurfacing no matter how many new developments appear. It's not what Meghan and Harry intended, not what the palace assumed, but what was actually built around Archie and Lilibet over time. Because once something is built that carefully, that consistently, it doesn't just disappear. It stays, it evolves, it eventually reveals itself in ways nobody fully expects. And if that moment is coming, if that file ever becomes more than a whisper, more than a suggestion, more than a quiet conversation behind closed doors, then this story doesn't just continue. It changes completely because the narrative that was once controlled becomes something else entirely. Something that even Meghan and Harry might not be able to shape anymore.